Welcome to our workshop, Monetizing Virtual or Streamed Productions, How to Generate Income Online. We're going to just make this about budgeting and getting money in. What we can't tell you in this particular workshop is how much income to budget, how many people will watch your virtual production, how to produce your show, not this session at least, and what show to choose for a virtual production. We're just talking about, in this case, what to consider when creating your budget, what to consider when creating projections for your virtual production, how to value your show for proper pricing, and differences that you should consider between a theatrical production, which you know, and a virtual production, which you might not know as well. So, theater marketing boils down to three things. Basically, it's product, which is your production, in this case, the virtual or online production. It's pricing, the ticket price for that, and other income streams as well. And how you promote it, how you tell people that you have this production coming up. First thing we need to do is to define your product, or in this case, the production. Now, you know, I'm sure, the theatrical side, so it's this virtual side that we really want to bring to bear in this discussion. Let's make a quick comparison so you know what we're talking about. Your product in your own theater is something you know. It's on stage, it's got a set for it, and then it's fully lit. You have costumes for your characters, you have probably some amplification for the actors, and certainly they have props. This is a theatrical model for production. That stuff you already know. So how does that compare when you're actually trying to move this over online? So what's online look like? Well, there is no stage. And beyond that, there's no set really, or it could be if you want one, and you have to figure out how to make that happen. Lighting is per character, whatever's in their room. Could be costumed, might not be. Everyone has mics, but they're all different quality of microphones. There could be props, that's your choice. So it can look homemade in some ways. So it doesn't have that sort of theatrical sense to it automatically. So what is your product? What is it that's different about an online production? Well, things that you have to consider in this, there's new learning opportunities for your students. Certainly you want to talk about the idea that much of what you teach for stage work applies in the virtual world as well. For actors, you want to tell the truth, you want to be honest with your emotions, you don't want to lie, you don't want to pretend. There are different challenges and different creative opportunities for students as well. Costumes and sets and props. Whether you make a choice or not, you've actually made a choice. If you've chosen not to do costumes, whatever the kids wear when they're on screen, that's their costume. Same with the set. Whatever's behind them, that's their set. And whatever might show up as furnishings, those are the props. The other part of this is how a student rises to the challenge of what's going on in creating an online production. The really cool thing is that parents see all of this happening. They see the learning that's happening in their homes as you teach them in their classes, as you teach them during the rehearsal process. Parents aren't usually seeing these kinds of things happening. So you've opened a window for them to see part of this process. And of course, they're also seeing their child being a part of a bigger project, which isn't always as evident to them. And they're seeing the process of all that happen before their eyes. What else is different about an online production? The environment's very different. It's not theatrical at all. The patron basically is going to see this from their home, not a special location. They're not going someplace central to watch this thing. They're watching it from their couches, whatever. The frame for this production is different. It's a computer screen or maybe a TV in their homes instead of the proscenium arch. The number of performances is going to be different because on stage you might schedule 2 to maybe 6 performances of a production, whereas on screen you probably schedule only 1, maybe 2 if you're trying to emulate a live experience for the kids, but most times it's really only going to be one time. You're not really selling seats in this process, you're selling numbers of computer connections, and that number could be unlimited, and certainly it's uncountable as to how many people are actually watching your show. That makes budgeting really kind of difficult to do. So absolutely, an online production is a very different product from a live theatrical experience. The educational experience is a part of the product, partly because parents will be seeing it. Now you may find your own marketable aspects to the product as well. Sell them, absolutely. If you're doing a play where 3 different characters handle a single prop, you're probably going to have to build that prop 3 times, so each of the actors has it available in their own individual homes at the time they need it during that performance. That's especially true if you're going to be doing that performance, that production, live. The problem-solving aspect of that is really kind of an interesting story. That's one of the things that you can sell. Okay, pricing your product. It's a very different game than pricing it for the theater. Let's talk about those differences. You really want to talk about the value of the product, not its cost or your ticket pricing history. You want to start from the value if you can. It's going to give you a different frame of reference. Now, we often talk about value statements in marketing, and this is a value statement that potentially could be made from a parent. What's the value of seeing my kid in a little box on a screen instead of on the stage? They're going to minimize, in essence, that experience, that value. You really don't want to be in this argument because you want to be able to get some value in this. Otherwise, they're going to say, well, I should be paying $1, or do I need to pay it all? I can see that on Facebook anytime I want to. So, what's the value of seeing my kid grow before my very eyes? That's a much better value statement for you to be working with, isn't it? Now set your price. Now we're going to talk about how that all works. All right. Think like a restaurant. I want you to think in terms of how restaurants do what they do. In the theater, you touch each patron at the ticket booth and then again at the concession stand, at the merchandise table, and they pull their wallet out each time they hit one of those stops. With online attendance, you touch each guest in their own space. It's like patrons at a restaurant, but you're touching them in their homes basically, and they're completely isolated from other patrons. There is no ticket booth and then a concession stand and a merchandise table, no sequential contact with these people. It is all at once. So it's very much like the restaurant in that regard. Now, a restaurant owner wants to increase guest check averages so that each table earns more for the restaurant. That's the kind of thing you want to think about in this process of budgeting for your virtual production. You probably have one person paying for several people, much like a restaurant. So if I take my family to the restaurant, I'm paying for all those who are at the table, right? Probably going to be the same thing for your virtual production. One person's going to pay and several people are going to watch. Now, each computer connecting to your stream then is like a table in a restaurant. You got one person paying and you got several people enjoying the restaurant, or in this case, several people enjoying your production. You want to generate a healthy average income per computer connection for your program. What are the elements of a guest check in the theater? We basically have them already in your theater. There are ticket sales, there are donations that people make to your program, concession sales, program ads are part of the guest check, potentially merchandise that you sell, and any creative enterprises connected to your show. This is a theatrical element. We've been doing this since at least the Globe Theater. For creative enterprises, that example would be something like this. Early on in our awards program, we saw a production of Urinetown at Bosque School, and they were charging people to go to the bathroom because in the show, of course, people have to pay to pee. So they were, quote unquote, charging you to go to the bathroom. Of course, you could get in for free, but it was part of the fun of it, actually. And they made a little more money. They increased the average guest check by collecting quarters, pennies, dimes, nickels, dollars, whatever, for people going to pee. So how's that compare to online? Online is a different environment for this kind of thing. You have ticket sales, of course, and you can still do donations, but concessions, not so much. But what if you did this? What if you got food delivered to the home and you arranged with some restaurant, maybe the local pizza parlor, for example, that you get 10% of whatever people spend at that pizza parlor that night when they mention a certain code word or the title of your show. You can also sell ads on the streamed show. You can put up ads literally before the show and during intermission. So you have some options here that replace program ads. You can sell merchandise online, maybe through Cafe Press or Zazzle. You might be able to make some similar arrangement with a local merchant. And of course, you can still make connections to the show for fundraising purposes in a creative way. A creative connection in this case might be something like our Stargrams that we do in our awards program, where people come to a table and for $1, they buy a little postcard that we send backstage. They can write a little message on it: break a leg, Bobby, Grandma and Grandpa. You could do an online version of that very easily. All of that becomes an individualized approach to making money for your show. It's much like the restaurant model where you're trying to increase the average guest check. Choosing a venue. This is important not because you're going to choose the right venue to stream this, and that's what I'm talking about, is where are you going to display the streamed performance. That's your venue in this case. But you have marketing considerations for the venue as well, and that's what we're going to discuss here. Think of this production being on the road. You're used to doing things in your own house. Well, if you were doing it on the road, you'd want to check things like how the house handles ticket sales, how the house handles taking tickets and seating patrons. And that's what we're talking about in these considerations for the venue choice you're going to have to make. Any streaming service you choose could have a maximum capacity. And let's say, for example, that it's 1,000 people, and you normally sell 2,000 tickets. Good for you. But now you're looking at it going, that's not going to work for me because I need to have at least 2,000. No, not necessarily. What you need to count are computer connections, not people attending. 1,000 computer connections might actually accommodate as many as 3,000 people. So you might be just fine with 1,000 maximum capacity. Figure that out. Use that as a calculation point. Social media sites, Facebook, YouTube, have no upper limits, but they offer little to no support for production. Their streaming services are really geared toward the individual streaming from their smartphone or maybe their tablet. They also have no gate, making the advanced sale of tickets kind of meaningless. That is, I can go onto your Facebook page anytime I want to. I don't have to pay anything to do that. So right off the bat, those social media sites seem like they'd be a bad choice. How are you going to make money out of this deal if you're streaming on a free site? You have to check other streaming site options to make sure they have gates to make tickets necessary, so you can sell those tickets in advance if that's what you want to do. Other considerations, you want to sell tickets per computer. This is one choice for you. Price that accordingly. Again, as we talked about, you might want to price it based on several people watching, not just sell it at one-person ticket prices. So if you normally sell your tickets for $10 in your theater, but you expect that maybe 3 people will be watching per computer, do you want to set that as a $30 price, maybe $25 just because? You got to figure the price per connection if you're going to sell tickets per computer. Now, the per family or per computer ticket process penalizes grandma who's watching alone. Maybe grandma who normally can't see these shows, she lives in Miami, now can see it because it's online and anybody can watch it anywhere in the world. Well, that's kind of cool for grandma, but now you've priced the tickets at $30 and grandma doesn't want to spend $30 to watch her grandson in this show long distance. So that's a penalization for grandma, right? There is a way to fix that for grandma, by the way, and for students who want to just watch their friend. Their own family isn't going to watch the show, but their friend has the lead. They're not involved in drama otherwise, but they were to go to the show at your theater. They do want to watch it at home, but they don't want to spend $30. So you can set up a discount for grandma or for students where you ask prior to the sale, as they're starting into the process of buying a ticket, are you a senior citizen? Are you a student at our school? Their choice at that point then steers them to discounts. Otherwise, if I don't choose either of those, then I don't get the discount. You can also sell tickets per person, of course. You want to find out if your ticket agency can sell more than one ticket to a patron. Eventbrite, for example, sells tickets, and you can do that through Eventbrite. You will probably end up with wasted tickets, even though you've got 4 tickets. Your computer's only going to connect once. Even if you are selling per person, you want them to buy 4 tickets, even though there's only going to be 1 connection. You want to walk them through being honest so that you say, okay, fine, please pay for everyone in your group. And most people will be honest. Some people will kind of sneak through and go, I'm just going to pay 2 tickets and I'm going to have my kids watch 2. Others will actually do the opposite. They'll say, there's only going to be 2 of us, but I'm going to buy 4 tickets just because they could use the money. So those kinds of things will happen, and there's not much you can do about it. It's just going to be the way it is. But those are choices you have to make. Sell tickets per computer, sell tickets per person. Now, as I said, individual tickets are on the honor system. So each ticket should have a unique access code. You can't distribute a password, because once I have the password, I can send that off to my friends. They don't have to have tickets now. They have the password. So your ticket sales plummet if you send out the password. You can opt for pay what you will. This is the third option. Everyone pays as they enter the performance. Now that means that Facebook and YouTube are then options again, since there's no gate for those. The other kinds of ticketing options don't work for that. But for our pay what you will, you can do that on social media. And you pay during the performance or just as you enter the performance, and you're asked to do so. You're not required to do so. If you decide to charge per computer, you might want a way to estimate how many viewers per computer you're talking about so you can really figure out how to charge accurately for that admission. If you have sales data from past shows that show the number of transactions and the number of tickets sold, here's what you do. Divide the number of tickets by the number of transactions. That's going to equal the approximate number of people per computer that you can anticipate. Now, obviously, this is actually what happened at your box office, at your theater, as opposed to what's going to happen online, but it will give you a very rough estimate of what to expect in online sales. Collecting money. This is a key factor, obviously. In ticket sales, if you're setting up your own process for selling tickets, you're going to need a means to collect money online. There's lots of entities out there, PayPal, Venmo, Cash, which is an online platform. It's not dollar bills, and Coffee. Those are just four of the kinds of platforms that are available to you. If you have your own website, you can add virtual tip jar as an app to your website and it will collect money for you. So those are possibilities. You can use an online ticket agent like holdmyticket.com, which is a New Mexico-based company. They're here in Albuquerque. Interesting about holdmyticket.com, they also stream performances and productions. So this could be your one-stop venue. They do everything. You also are going to be limited by what your school allows you or requires you to do in the process. So they're going to be finicky, some of them, about how you collect money, especially online. If you were just collecting money at the door, they want some cash handling procedures in place, but online it's all credit cards and debit cards, so you got to be really extra careful. Now, that will also mean that if you're dealing with a PayPal or a virtual tip jar, you need banking information before those options so you can get paid. Some ticket agents can pay by check, but they may also want banking information so they can just transfer that money to you. You will want to make sure that you keep money in a distinct account if you can possibly do it. You certainly want to make sure that your service provides you with detailed sales reports. So at the end of it all, you can say, these are the number of tickets I sold. This is the amount of money that goes into my account for having done all of this. So other things you need to consider when you're collecting money. You want whatever choice you make to be PCI compliant. That means it's basically safe for me as a patron to give you my credit card number. It's also safe for you to have it. It's not likely to get hacked or stolen. You do not want that liability. You also have to know how much the agent or service charges for credit card transactions. A standard usually is like 2.9% of the total transaction plus 30 cents per transaction. So if you sell $20 worth of tickets, 2.9%, that's 58 cents plus the 30 cents, you're out 88 cents for that transaction. You're only going to get $19.12 for those tickets. So make sure you're aware of that for budgeting purposes. How quickly can you get your money? This is another thing you have to find out from the services. Some are overnight, some take a few days. Even those that say they are overnight might be overnight only Monday through Friday. So on Friday when you request money, you don't get it until Monday. How easy is it to use? Not for you, but for your patrons. Certainly you as well, but you want to make sure that you don't boggle the minds of your patrons. Venmo, for example, requires users to have accounts. You think grandma's going to want to create a Venmo account? Maybe. Maybe not. You're also going to be collecting donations. Any of those money collecting apps, PayPal, Venmo, etc., will work. An online ticket agent may have a donation option. You want to check into that, ask them about that. There are certainly fundraising platforms, GoFundMe. We use Snowball, which is free to set up as an account. They still charge, by the way, for transactions, so you'll have to figure that in as well again. Facebook has a donation option, so if you're using Facebook for any reason, you can set that up as a link, as a button. It's free. I don't think they charge you, but it is, from what I've heard, sort of difficult to set up. You need to indicate that you'll accept large donations. Most of your donations are going to be, $20, $25. But if you don't tell people you take the $500 donation, if you don't have that option available to them or don't show that option, they might not consider it. And all it takes is one to get a really substantial amount of money in the door, right? So indicate that you'll take large donations and you might get one. Please be straightforward about what your program does to deserve a donation. This is the don't hide your light under a bushel thing. You certainly want to tell people what it is you do. In this case, though, don't tell people that you've got a searchlight when what you've got is a Fresnel. Be straightforward, be honest about what you're doing. But make sure you talk about the education program and the education aspect of your program, because that's part of what you're selling, especially in the donation aspect of this process. Always acknowledge donations. Send a letter thanking somebody for their donation. They may use it for tax purposes, and that could be really helpful for them, but it's also just smart to do because you may get another one. All right, collecting money for other income. For merchandise, for example, Cafe Press and Zazzle are self-contained. They'll take the credit cards, they'll charge you for that process, and then they'll send out the merchandise and everything's done. They're expensive. You don't make much money out of it. A standard t-shirt might cost $27 to you in this process. So in order for you to make any money off of that t-shirt, you probably have to sell that standard t-shirt at about $35 just to make even a little bit off of it. Not much markup there. And they may have revenue minimums for payouts. In other words, you've got to earn a certain level of revenue before they'll send you any money at all. So check on that if you're going to do this. Can you use Square or similar? You know what a Square is? It's that little square device that sits on the top of somebody's phone and plugs in so that you can insert your credit card and take that credit card information, or you can swipe the card in that device. You can actually even enter the data from it, so all the digits you need can be manually entered. If you can get a Square, or you have Squares at your school or something similar, that might be a really good use for you, especially for smaller or local or touchless transactions. Things like selling ads. Whoever buys them may say, sure, let me put that on my credit card, and you can enter that in through your Square process. It's easy, it's safe, it's fast, very convenient for both of you, and it works really well. Yes, you're going to pay transaction fees on it, but the convenience and safety factors are really very helpful. You will be required in a Square or similar device to enter banking information if that's not already set up. Now, your school's bank may have a solution. They may have something similar to a Square if they don't use Square itself. You might inquire about that service from your school. Promoting your product is really important here, obviously. How you tell people about the show that you're doing is critical to actually making sales. So let's talk about how that works. You already know how it works in your own theater. Promotion elements for theaters include things like posters. You use them all the time, right? Flyers that are much like posters. You might use those, you might not. Social media, certainly. You're telling the kids to go out on social media to talk about this show. Emails, I hope you're using those. They're very effective. You want to make sure you're listed on activities calendars and school website. These are all sort of traditional to a typical play produced in your own school. Well, how's that compare to the online play? The medium used, or the media used, are not going to be that different, but the emphasis will be different. Social media will be very important now because you can include the links to either the venue, so to speak, the streaming service, or the ticket site that you're using. Emails are going to be really important. Again, you can include those links that you need. You want to be on activities calendars because, again, that's an online presence and you can connect people into what you're doing very quickly with that. Certainly the school website, especially in smaller towns, school websites tend to be sort of a town square for school activities. Posters, you can use them, but they're probably not going to be as important to you now. People aren't going out of their homes as much. They're not seeing posters as frequently. And flyers can be used too. We'll talk about how that might be true in a minute. That's the new paradigm for promotion elements. The strategies you use are all based in people. And I'm going to talk about the different facets of promotion based around the people involved. So you want a team to promote your show. And it could be parents and students, either or. If you don't normally involve parents, this is a great time to do that because they can sit at home and help with the social media too, especially for reaching out to older generations. Business students, if you have a business or an enterprise class or a teacher in your school, see if this couldn't be one of their projects to work on during the year. It's a great real-life experience promoting this show and trying to get people to buy tickets. There are people in the promotions as well. You want to feature the people who are doing this show, your students who are in the show, the actors, or people working behind the scenes. And you want good pictures, not screen captures of the rehearsals. The better the picture can be, lighting, composition, just all the good qualities of what a picture should be. You want to have that available for both social media and for local print media. And the people in it are also, essentially, their stories. The students who are creating new effects and learning new skills for this particular production. If you do indeed have to create a prop 3 times, that's a cool story. Normally you wouldn't have to do that in a stage production, but you do have to do it for the online production. And so that's a cool thing to tell. That's putting the people into the promotions to tell that story and get people involved in it. Of course, the audience is basically people in a different social strata. Students and parents and grandparents each have different social media or media consumption habits. And that's a really critical thing to note. Your students, they're dealing with WhatsApp, Snapchat, and TikTok. Grandma's probably not doing those. Certainly not as much. And so you need to make sure that you're aware of that when you're reaching out through social media to pay attention to what grandma is watching. So you want to be on Facebook as well. Just because the students aren't there doesn't mean it's not an important place to be. Certainly you want to sell the tickets to parents and grandparents and all family members, but your community often wants to see the shows you're doing as well. So involve them. Talk to local news and radio. There's not a lot going on right now, and so having this story, this is kind of new, telling people, yes, we're going to do theater, but we're going to do it online. Well, that's news. So get that out there. You can use the school email list, absolutely, the school website and the school social media. You want to be sure you're doing all those kinds of things. Because again, that town square mentality of what the school is up to, people want to know that. So get on those sites. And you want to be on, again, local activity calendars so that people can catch it. Now, we talked about flyers earlier. You can do this by putting flyers in pickup or delivery order bags. People are taking food to go quite a lot these days. So if you're in the bags with a little flyer, that's perfect. And if in particular you've arranged to have food delivered during the performance that night, definitely work with that restaurant to make sure that people know about that option. Here's one that I thought of that might help, especially for smaller town circumstances, where you launch a Give an Inch campaign. Local businesses buy ads by the inch in the local newspaper, and oftentimes they have to contract for a certain number of inches per year. If they gave an inch to you out of their contract, and you got 10 of those businesses doing that, you get 10-inch ad in the newspaper that way. And if you can get the newspaper to match that, you've got 20 inches in the newspaper to advertise. And you can use that for 2 10-inch ads rather than one 20-inch ad. You could do the same thing on radio as a Give a Minute campaign, where people give a minute out of one of their ad buys on radio. And you can use the minute either as a full minute or as 2 30-second ads, or maybe 4 15s. That's an interesting way of involving your community in this process. Here are some of the resources we've mentioned. We'll have links below so you can find these services and investigate them. There are a lot more, but these are just the ones we've talked about here. I hope this helps you a great deal in your virtual production, and in particular, of course, for budgeting for that production. If you have any questions, reach out to us at nmhsmta@gmail.com, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. Thank you very much.